Asterisk, asterisk. Part 1. The Cracked Desert and the Scream in the Canyon. Asterisk, asterisk. The Arizona sun hung like a brass medallion in the bleached sky, baking the earth until it cracked like old leather. Isabella Rose pressed her gloved hand against the stagecoach window, watching the endless expanse of sagebrush and red rock blur past. 3 days out from Tucson, heading toward California, and already she felt the weight lifting from her chest. The further she got from Phoenix, from asterisk him asterisk, the easier it became to breathe. "Ma'am, you might want to pull that curtain," the driver called down. "Apache territory ahead. No sense advertising we got a lady aboard." Isabella's fingers tightened on the worn leather of her travel bag. Inside, wrapped in her late husband's kerchief, lay the deed to a small ranch in California, her only inheritance, her only hope. She'd married young, loved deeply, and buried her husband before her 25th birthday. Now, at 27, she was running from a man who believed a widow's property and the widow herself were his for the taking. Samuel Harriman. Even thinking his name made her stomach turn. The wealthiest rancher in Phoenix, with hands in every pocket and a badge in every town. When she'd refused his proposal, if one could call it that, he'd made it clear she wouldn't have a choice much longer. The coach lurched, jolting her from her thoughts. Outside, the other passengers stirred nervously. There were 5 of them crammed into the dusty interior, a Methodist preacher sweating through his black coat, 2 miners heading back to California, a salesman with a case of patent medicines, and Isabella. "Probably just a rut," the salesman said, but his voice cracked like the desert floor. Then came the shot, not the crisp crack of a rifle, but the deep boom of a scattergun. The coach horses screamed and bolted. Isabella grabbed the door frame as the coach tilted dangerously, wooden wheels groaning against stone. "Raiders," the driver's voice cut through the chaos. Another boom, and the coach shuddered to a halt, tilted at an angle that pressed Isabella against the window. Through the dust cloud, she saw them not Apache, but white men with bandanas pulled over their faces. Harriman's men. Her blood turned to ice water in her veins. "Everyone out hands where we can see 'em." The preacher fumbled with the door, practically falling into the dirt. The others followed, hands raised. But Isabella hesitated. These weren't random bandits. They were here for her. "There's a lady in here," one of the miners called out, perhaps thinking chivalry might save them all. "We know." The lead rider, a man with cold blue eyes above his bandana, dismounted. "Mrs. Rose, Mr. Harriman sends his regards. Says you forgot something in Phoenix. Namely, your wedding." Isabella's mind raced. 5 men, all armed. The drivers were already face down in the dirt. The shotgun messenger nowhere to be seen, likely dead. The other passengers wouldn't help. She could see it in their carefully averted gazes. "I'm a widow in mourning," she said, forcing steel into her voice. "Mr. Harriman has no claim on me." "Funny thing about claims." The man stepped closer. "They don't much matter out here." That's when the shooting started, not from the bandits, but from the rocky ridge above. The sharp crack of rifles echoed off the canyon walls. Isabella saw one of Harriman's men spin and fall, crimson blooming across his chest. "Apache!" someone screamed. The word hit the group like lightning. The bandits' horses reared and scattered. Men who'd been coldly professional moments before now fired wildly at the rocks, at shadows, at death they couldn't see. Isabella didn't think. As the chaos erupted around her, she grabbed her travel bag and ran, not down the road where the horses had bolted, not back toward Phoenix, but straight into the maze of red rock and juniper that bordered the road. Behind her, the gunfire intensified, screams of men and horses creating a symphony of terror. Her traveling dress, proper for a coach ride but useless for scrambling over rocks, caught on thorns and rough stone. She heard the fabric tear but didn't stop. The sound of pursuit, or what she thought was pursuit, drove her deeper into the wild. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. Her throat burned with thirst, and her chest heaved with exertion. The corset that propriety demanded was now a torture device, squeezing her ribs until spots danced in her vision. Still, she pushed on, following what might have been a deer trail or just a gap between rocks. She didn't know how long she ran. Time blurred in the heat. The gunfire had long since faded, replaced by the oppressive silence of the desert. When she finally stopped, collapsed against a boulder in the shade of an overhang, she realized the terrible truth: she was completely, utterly lost. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains, painting the rocks in shades of blood and gold. Isabella tried to calm her breathing, to think rationally. She had no water, no food save for some crackers in her bag, no weapon, and no idea which direction led to civilization. A sound made her freeze the soft scuff of leather on stone. She pressed herself against the boulder, heart hammering. Had Harriman's men followed her, or worse, had she stumbled into Apache territory in truth? The figure that emerged from the shadows moved like smoke, silent despite the loose stones. Isabella's first impression was of dark hair falling past broad shoulders, of skin burnished by sun, of eyes as black as the desert night. An Apache warrior, no doubt about it. Blood stained his left side, seeping through what looked like a cavalry uniform shirt likely taken from a dead soldier. He saw her in the same instant she saw him. For a moment, neither moved. Isabella could see the calculation in his eyes, the same wariness she felt. He was wounded, possibly badly. She was alone, defenseless. She should have screamed, should have run. Instead, something in his face, pain, perhaps, or a weariness that matched her own, made her stay still. He said something in Apache, the words flowing like water over stone. When she didn't respond, he switched to Spanish, then finally, heavily accented English. "White woman should not be here."
"I had no choice."
Her voice came out as a whisper.
"I was running."
He swayed slightly, catching himself against the rock wall. The bloodstain was spreading. Whatever had happened at the coach, he'd been part of it or caught in it. "You are hurt," she said, stating the obvious. His laugh was bitter. "White men's bullets. They burn like white men's whiskey." Isabella made a decision that would have horrified everyone she knew. She opened her travel bag and pulled out her late husband's kerchief, the one wrapped around the deed. "Let me help." The warrior's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because—" She paused, realizing the truth. "Because we're both running from white men today." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. As she approached, he tensed but didn't pull away. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30 winters. The wound was bad. A bullet had grazed his ribs, leaving a furrow that bled steadily. She worked in silence, using strips torn from her petticoat to bind the wound. His skin was fever-hot under her fingers, and she could feel the tension in his muscles, ready to spring into action despite his injury.
"My name is Isabella,"
she said softly. "Dakota," he replied after a pause. "It means friend to everyone." His smile was grim. "My father had hope." She finished binding the wound and stepped back. The sun was nearly touching the horizon now, and the temperature was already beginning to drop. The desert that had been an oven would soon be cold as a tomb. "You cannot stay here," Dakota said. "These rocks are hunting grounds for creatures that wake when the sun sleeps."
"I don't know the way back."
"Back to where the white man's rode." He shook his head. "They will be watching. The ones who survived." Isabella felt the last of her hope drain away. Harriman's men would be waiting on the road. The Apache would likely kill her if she encountered them. And the desert itself was a patient killer, waiting for her to make a mistake. Dakota watched her face, reading her despair. "You helped me. I will not let the desert take you. Come." "Where?" "There is shelter, not far. Water." He paused. But you must trust.
Trust an Apache warrior. Everything she'd been taught, every newspaper account she'd read, every whispered story in Phoenix society screamed against it. But what choice did she have? She was about to answer when he suddenly tensed, head turning toward the south. A moment later, she herded 2 horses, moving fast. They track you. Dakota said it wasn't a question.
Yes, the rancher who believes I belong to him.
Something flickered in the warrior's dark eyes. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition of a shared enemy.
Without warning, he grabbed her arm and pulled her behind him. 3 riders appeared on the ridge above, silhouettes against the dying light. Isabella recognized the lead rider's voice immediately. Jack Thornton, Harriman's foreman. She came this way. Boot prints lead right to these rocks. Dakota's hand moved to the knife at his belt. Isabella could feel the tension radiating from him, the coiled readiness of a predator. But he was wounded, and they were 3 armed men. The riders began to descend, picking their way carefully among the rocks. In minutes, they'd be upon them. Isabella's mind raced. She could surrender, go with them, submit to a fate worse than death. Or her hand found a fist-sized rock. Without thinking, she brought it down hard on Dakota's wounded side. He gasped, doubling over, and she pushed past him, stumbling into the open. "Here," she called out. "I'm here, there's a savage." The riders spurred forward. Behind her, she heard Dakota curse in Apache, heard him moving despite the pain. As Thornton reached for her, she suddenly ducked, rolling aside. The foreman's horse, startled by the sudden movement, reared. Dakota burst from the rocks like a mountain cat. His knife found the soft spot beneath Thornton's ribs before the man could draw his gun. The second rider fired wild, the bullet sparking off stone. Isabella grabbed Thornton's dropped pistol, her hands shaking as she pointed it at the third man. "Drop it!" she screamed. The man hesitated, looking between the white woman with the gun and the Apache warrior pulling his knife from Thornton's body. That hesitation cost him. Dakota's thrown knife caught him in the throat. The last rider had seen enough. He wheeled his horse and fled, spurring hard back the way he'd come. Isabella stood there, gun still raised, watching him disappear. The pistol began to shake in her hands. She'd just helped kill 2 men, white men, her own kind. Dakota retrieved his knife, wiping it clean on Thornton's shirt. When he looked at her, there was something new in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or surprise. "You are not what I expected from a white woman." "I'm not what I expected either," she admitted, finally lowering the gun. He collected the dead men's weapons with practiced efficiency, then caught one of their horses a sturdy paint that didn't shy from the smell of blood. The other horses had fled with the surviving rider. "Now we must go," Dakota said. "He will bring more, many more." Isabella looked at the bodies, at the blood soaking into the thirsty earth. There was no going back now. She'd cast her lot with an Apache warrior, spilled white blood in the desert. If Harriman had wanted her before, he'd want her dead now. As if reading her thoughts, Dakota extended his hand. "Come, the desert is no place for regret." She took his hand, surprised by its warmth, its steadiness. He helped her onto the paint horse, then swung up behind her with a grace that belied his injury. His arms came around her to take the reins, and she was suddenly acutely aware of his presence, the solid warmth of his chest against her back, the scent of sage and smoke and something uniquely him. "Where are we going?" she asked as he turned the horse toward the deepening shadows of the mountains. "Away from death," he said simply. "Toward tomorrow, if the spirits allow." As they rode into the gathering darkness, Isabella heard something that made her blood run cold, the distant sound of Apache war cries echoing off the canyon walls. Not behind them, but ahead. Dakota's arms tightened around her. "My people," he said quietly. "They hunt tonight." "Will they?" She couldn't finish the question.
I do not know, he admitted. But you helped me. You drew white blood for me. Perhaps that will be enough. Perhaps. Isabella closed her eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of the horse beneath them, the solid presence of the warrior behind her. She'd fled one fate only to ride straight into another, trading the certainty of Harriman's possession for the uncertainty of Apache justice. The moon was rising, painting the desert in silver and shadow. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and its pack answered. Isabella shivered, and without thinking, pressed back against Dakota's warmth. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "Yes," she admitted. "Good," he said. "Fear keeps us alive in the desert, but you are strange." Isabella rose. "You fear, but you do not flee. You think, then you strike, like Apache woman." "I'm not Apache." "No," he agreed. "You are something else, something I have not seen before." They rode in silence for a time, the horse picking its way carefully through the treacherous terrain. Then, without warning, Dakota pulled the horse to a stop. His hand moved to her throat, not threatening, but tilting her chin up. Above them, mounted on a ridge, sat 5 Apache warriors. Their faces were painted for war, their rifles glinting in the moonlight. Isabella's heart stopped. One of them called out in Apache. Dakota responded, his voice steady but tense. A rapid exchange followed, voices rising and falling like the desert wind. Isabella caught her own name, saw the warrior's eyes fix on her with cold assessment. Finally, Dakota said in English, loud enough for all to hear, "She is under my protection. She drew white blood when I was wounded. The spirit sent her." The lead warrior, older than the others, with silver threading his long hair, rode closer. He said something that made Dakota's arms tighten around her. "He says white women bring death." Dakota translated quietly, "That you are poison, even if you helped me." Isabella's mouth was dry as dust, but she forced herself to speak. "Then I'll go. Just point me toward—" Dakota's hand covered her mouth, cutting off her words. The movement pulled at her dress. Already torn from her flight through the rocks, the fabric gave way with a sound like a sigh, baring her shoulder to the cool night air. The warriors shifted, hands moving to weapons, but Dakota spoke quickly, harshly. His free hand moved to the torn fabric, not to expose her further, but to pull it closed, his fingers gentle against her skin. The gesture seemed to mean something to the watching warriors. The leader studied them for a long moment, then spoke again. "He asks if you are my woman," Dakota said against her ear. Isabella knew her life hung on her answer. These men would kill her without hesitation if they saw her as enemy, but to claim to be Dakota's woman— "Tell him," she whispered, then louder, turning her head to look directly at the war leader. "Tell him yes. Tell him I belong to—" She hesitated, then used the Apache word she'd heard them say, "to Dakota, that I am his to protect or punish as he sees fit." The words tasted strange on her tongue, but she saw something shift in the warriors' faces. Dakota translated, his voice carefully neutral, but she felt the way his body tensed behind her. The war leader rode closer still, until his horse stood beside theirs. He reached out and touched the torn fabric of her dress, then said something that made the other warriors laugh not kindly. "He says a man who cannot keep his woman's dress whole cannot keep his woman safe." Dakota translated, and she heard the embarrassment in his voice. Before anyone could move, before thought could interfere with instinct, Isabella grabbed the torn fabric and ripped it further, baring her shoulder and the top of her corset to the night. The warriors went silent. "Then let him see," she said, her voice stronger than she felt, "that I choose to tear my own dress, that I am not a weak white woman who needs protection, but one who chooses her protector." She looked directly at the war leader, then deliberately leaned back against Dakota, making her choice clear. "Tell him," she said, loud enough for all to hear, "that I am yours, that I choose to be yours, that any who would harm me must answer to you." The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Then the war leader laughed a sound like thunder rolling through the canyons. He spoke rapidly to Dakota, gestured to the other warriors, and wheeled his horse around. As quickly as they had appeared, the war party melted back into the darkness, leaving Isabella and Dakota alone with the paint horse and the watching stars. "What did he say?" she asked, suddenly aware that she was half undressed, pressed against a warrior she'd met only hours ago, having just declared herself his woman to save her life. Dakota was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with something she couldn't name. He said any white woman brave enough or foolish enough to tear her own dress and claim an Apache warrior deserves whatever fate she finds. He said the spirits must be laughing tonight. He paused. He also said I must take you to the camp, that the women will decide if you spoke truth or lies. The women. Apache women are not like white women. They will test you if you are found false. He didn't finish. Isabella pulled the torn fabric over her shoulder, suddenly cold despite his warmth. And if I'm found true, then you are Apache in all but blood, protected by the tribe. His hand came up, hesitated, then gently fixed her dress as best he could. But Isabella, you must understand, words spoken to save a life have power. The spirits heard you. My people heard you. I know, she said quietly. I knew when I said them. They rode on through the silver desert, toward an uncertain dawn. Behind them lay civilization, safety, the world Isabella had always known. Ahead lay the Apache camp, warrior women who would judge her, and a life she couldn't imagine. But as Dakota's arms held her secure on the steady horse, as the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, Isabella felt something she hadn't felt since her husband's death. Not safe, the desert was never safe. Not certain, nothing was certain now. But alive, terribly, wonderfully alive. And in that moment, with her dress torn and her old life in ashes behind her, Isabella Rose allowed herself one wild, desperate thought. Asterisk. Let them test me. Let them judge me. I have already been broken and remade by this desert. What more can they do but finish what the night began? Asterisk. The horse walked on, carrying them toward fate or freedom, and Isabella closed her eyes and listened to the strong, steady heartbeat of the Apache warrior who had become, in one desperate moment, her only hope of survival. Asterisk, asterisk. Part 2, The Silence of the Ravine and the Warrior Without a Smile. Asterisk, asterisk. The Apache camp materialized from the desert like a mirage becoming real. One moment there was only rock and shadow. The next, wickiups dotted the protected valley like strange growths from the earth itself. Cook fires glowed like fallen stars, and the sound of voices, men, women, children drifted on the night air. Dakota dismounted first, his movement stiff from the ride and his wound. When he reached up to help Isabella down, their eyes met in the firelight. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the line they'd crossed, the words that couldn't be taken back. Stay close, he murmured. Say nothing unless asked directly. And whatever happens, show no fear. Isabella nodded, though her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird. The torn shoulder of her dress had been roughly pinned, but she was still acutely aware of her disheveled appearance, of the blood, not all of it, Dakota's that stained her hands and clothes. Women emerged from the wickiups, their faces unreadable in the dancing shadows. Unlike the white women Isabella knew, these moved with a confidence born of harsh living, their dark eyes missing nothing. Children peered from behind their mothers' skirts, curious but wary. An older woman stepped forward, her gray-streaked hair bound in an intricate style Isabella had never seen. She spoke to Dakota in rapid Apache, her tone sharp as flint. Isabella caught her own name several times, saw the woman's eyes flick over her with assessment. This is Nayeli, Dakota said quietly. My father's sister. She leads the Women's Council. Nayeli circled Isabella slowly, like a wolf evaluating prey. She touched the torn dress, examined Isabella's soft hands, lifted a strand of her auburn hair. Then she spoke directly to Isabella in accented but clear English. "You claim my nephew." Isabella met her gaze steadily. "I claimed his protection. He gave it." "Protection?" Nayeli's smile was thin. "White women know nothing of what protection means here. You think it is walls and locks and men with guns. Here, protection is earning your place every day. It is hands that work, eyes that watch, heart that endures." She said something to the gathered women that made several laugh. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that came from hard-won wisdom. "Come," Nayeli commanded. "We will see what kind of woman claims an Apache warrior." Isabella looked back at Dakota, but he was already being led away by two men, presumably to have his wound properly tended. She was alone among the Apache women, her fate in their weathered hands. They took her to a wickiup set apart from the others. Inside, by the light of a small fire, they stripped her with ruthless efficiency. Her corset caused murmurs of disbelief. One woman poked at the stays as if they were instruments of torture. Which, Isabella reflected, they were. They examined her pale skin, her soft body that had never known true hardship. One woman, younger than the others, touched the ring of bruises around Isabella's wrist marks left by Harriman's men when they'd tried to force her into a carriage 3 days ago. The woman's eyes met Isabella's with something like understanding. Nayeli held up Isabella's dress, torn and blood-stained. "This tells a story," she said. "But is it a true story?" They gave her Apache clothing, a long shirt of soft deerskin, leggings, moccasins that felt strange after years of heeled boots. As she dressed, Isabella felt herself being remade, layer by layer. The white woman's trappings fell away, replaced by practical garments that moved with the body rather than constraining it. When she emerged from the wickiup, she found Dakota waiting. His wound had been cleaned and rebound, and he too had changed clothes, in traditional Apache dress. He looked different, younger somehow, but also more dangerous. The warrior the white world feared. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her, something flickering across his face too quickly to read. "The women will test you now," he said. "I cannot help you. To interfere would shame us both." Nayeli led them to the center of the camp where a fire burned bright. The entire band had gathered perhaps 50 souls, Isabella guessed. Warriors, women, elders, children, all watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. An old man, his face a map of years and wisdom, spoke from his place of honor. Dakota translated quietly. "He is Kuruk, our chief. He asks why a white woman's blood should not feed the desert that has drunk so much Apache blood." Isabella stepped forward, her new moccasins silent on the packed earth. When she spoke, she tried to make her voice carry to all. "Because I too have enemies among the white men. Because I too have run rather than submit. Because," she looked directly at the chief, "because I killed for one of your people when I could have bought my safety with his life." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Kuruk's eyes sharpened. "Show them your hands," Dakota said quietly. Isabella held out her hands, palms up. The firelight caught the blood still caked under her nails. In the lines of her palms, not Apache blood, but white men's blood, shed to protect an Apache life. One of the warriors from the ridge stepped forward and spoke rapidly. Isabella recognized enough to understand he was recounting what he'd witnessed her deception of Dakota, her sudden turn on Harriman's men, the way she'd held a gun steady on armed men. When he finished, silence fell like a heavy blanket. Then Nayeli stepped forward with a knife. Isabella's breath caught, but she forced herself to remain still. The older woman took Isabella's hand almost gently, then drew the blade across her palm. Blood welled, dark in the firelight. Then Nayeli cut her own palm and pressed their hands together, blood mingling with blood. "Apache blood is shed for family," she said loud enough for all to hear. "You shed white blood for Apache. Now Apache blood runs with yours.
You are not Apache, but you are not enemy. The relief that flooded through Isabella nearly buckled her knees. Dakota's hand found her elbow, steadying her. There is more, he warned quietly. Nayeli wasn't finished. But blood is easy, she continued. Life is hard. You want protection, you must earn it. You must learn our ways, work as we work, live as we live. And you must prove the words you spoke to save your life were not just wind. Isabella understood. She had claimed to be Dakota's woman. Now she must live that claim, whatever it meant. I understand, she said. Do you? Nayeli's smile was sharp. Tomorrow you begin. Tonight. She gestured to a small wickiup on the edge of camp. Tonight you learn what it means to trust an Apache warrior. The implications hung in the air like smoke. Isabella felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her chin high. Around them, the gathered Apache began to disperse, the entertainment apparently over. Dakota led her to the indicated wickiup in silence. Inside, a small fire had been laid, blankets spread on the ground. It was sparse but clean, private but not isolated. A test and a trust all at once. You don't have to, Dakota began once they were alone. Don't, Isabella interrupted. We both know what I said, what they expect, what honor demands. He studied her in the firelight. You are afraid. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Yes, but not of you. What then? She sat on one of the blankets, suddenly exhausted. I'm afraid of who I'm becoming. 3 days ago I was a proper widow, running from an unwanted marriage. Tonight I have blood under my nails and Apache clothes on my back. I don't recognize myself. Dakota sat across the fire from her, maintaining careful distance. The desert changes people. It burns away what is not essential. And what's essential? Survival, truth, the will to live free. He paused. You could have gone with those men, been Harriman's wife, lived in a fine house with servants and silk dresses. Isabella's laugh was bitter. A cage is a cage, whether the bars are gold or iron. Yes. His agreement was simple but weighted with understanding. They sat in companionable silence, the fire crackling between them. Outside, the camp settled into nighttime rhythms. Somewhere a baby cried and was quickly soothed. A dog barked. Normal sounds of life that seemed extraordinary given where Isabella had been that morning. Tell me about him, Dakota said suddenly. Your husband, the one who died. The question surprised her. Why? Because a woman who runs rather than remarry loved deeply, and a warrior should know what kind of love he protects. Isabella closed her eyes, summoning Jonathan's face. He was kind, a schoolteacher who came west for his health. Gentle hands, gentle words. He taught me to read more than just the Bible and ladies' magazines. Taught me to think, to question. She smiled sadly. He would have been horrified by what I did today. Would he? She considered. No. He would have understood. He always said courage wasn't the absence of fear, but right action despite it. A wise man. He was. Harriman had him killed. The words came out flat, matter of fact. Made it look like consumption finally took him, but I know. Jonathan had been helping Mexican families file proper claims on lands Harriman wanted, so Harriman had him poisoned. Dakota's eyes glittered dangerously. And you could prove nothing. A Mexican woman's word against the richest white man in Phoenix. The sheriff laughed me out of his office. So you ran. So I ran. She met his gaze. And you? Why does an Apache warrior wear parts of a cavalry uniform? His jaw tightened. It belonged to my brother. He scouted for the army, believed peace could be found through cooperation. His voice turned bitter. They killed him anyway. Said he was spying for hostiles. The uniform was all they gave us to bury. I'm sorry. Why you did not kill him? No, but my people did, just as they're killing your people, pushing them from lands they've held for generations. Dakota studied her with those dark, unreadable eyes.
You are a strange white woman, Isabella Rose.
So you keep saying. A ghost of a smile touched his lips the first she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, revealing the man beneath the warrior's mask. My brother would have liked you, he said. He believed there could be understanding between our peoples. I thought him a fool. He paused. Perhaps I was wrong. The fire had burned low, casting more shadows than light. The space between them seemed to shrink and expand with each breath. Isabella knew she should be terrified alone with a man she'd met only hours ago, in a camp full of Apache who had every reason to hate her. Instead, she felt oddly safe, protected not by walls or laws, but by something older, more primal, honor, word given and received, blood shed and shared.
What happens tomorrow?
She asked. You learn. Nayeli will teach you women's work, not the tea parties and embroidery of white women, but real work. Gathering, preparing food, making shelter. You will struggle. Your soft hands will blister and bleed. Your body will ache. They will test your resolve. And if I fail, then you leave. We will take you close enough to a settlement to walk. What happens after? He shrugged. Death, most likely. Harriman would see to that. But Isabella didn't say it aloud.
I won't fail,
she said instead. No, Dakota agreed quietly. I don't think you will. He banked the fire and moved to his own blankets, giving her privacy and space. But before he settled, he spoke once more. Isabella, what you said to the warriors about being mine
was necessary,
she finished.
I know. You don't have to.
You don't understand. His voice was careful, controlled. Among my people, such words have weight. The women will watch how we are together. They will expect. He paused, searching for words. Not what a white man would take, but what an Apache man would give. Protection. Yes, but also partnership, respect, trust. She pulled a blanket around her shoulders, the weight of the day finally settling on her. I can do partnership, respect, trust will take time. Yes, he agreed, for both of us. As she lay down, still in her Apache clothes, Isabella thought about the morning. Had it only been this morning, she'd been in a stagecoach, running toward a new life in California. California seemed as distant as the moon, as unreachable as her old life. Dakota, she called softly. Thank you for saving my life, for this. She gestured vaguely at the wiki-up. The camp beyond. You saved mine first, he reminded her. Debt paid. But they both knew it was more complex than that. Debts of blood and honor, protection and trust. Words spoken in desperate moments that bound them in ways neither fully understood. Outside, a wolf howled in the distant mountains. Its pack answered, their song wild and free and achingly beautiful. Isabella closed her eyes and listened, letting the sound wash over her like a benediction. Tomorrow would bring tests she couldn't imagine, challenges that might break her. But tonight, she was alive. Tonight, she lay under an Apache roof with an Apache name tied to hers, her old life burning away like paper in flame. And despite everything, or perhaps because of it, Isabella Rose smiled into the darkness. The desert had claimed her, remade her, given her to a warrior without a smile and a people without trust in whites. Whether it would keep her or kill her remained to be seen. But for the first time since Jonathan's death, she felt the cage bars falling away. Whatever came next, she would meet it with eyes open and hands ready to work. The wolf song faded into silence. The camp slept. And in a small wiki-up on the edge of everything, a white woman in Apache clothes and an Apache warrior in cavalry remnants kept watch over each other through the long desert night. Trust would come with sunrise, built one careful moment at a time, but protection that was already given, already received.
sealed in blood and firelight and words that could not be taken back. The silence of the ravine was complete, but it was not empty. It was full of possibility, of transformation, of two wounded souls finding something neither had sought but both desperately needed. Tomorrow would test them. Tonight was enough. Asterisk, asterisk. Part 3. The Invisible Wounds. Asterisk, asterisk. Dawn came to the Apache camp like a whisper, painting the eastern mountains in shades of rose and gold. Isabella woke to unfamiliar sounds, women's voices calling to each other, children laughing, the scrape of stone on stone. Her body ached from sleeping on the ground, and her cut palm throbbed with each heartbeat. Dakota was already gone, his blankets neatly folded. Through the wiki-up's opening, she could see him by the central fire with other warriors, their heads bent in serious discussion, even from a distance. She noticed how he held himself slightly favoring his wounded side, though he'd die before showing weakness openly. You sleep late for one who claims to be Apache. Isabella turned to find Nayeli in the doorway, her expression unreadable. The older woman carried a burden basket and wore a knife at her belt as naturally as white women wore brooches. "I'll learn to wake earlier," Isabella replied, rising stiffly. "You'll learn many things, or you'll leave." Nayeli's eyes swept over her critically. First lesson Apache women work. Always come. The day that followed was the hardest Isabella had ever known. Nayeli set her to grinding mesquite pods with a stone metate, work that looked simple until you tried it. Within an hour, Isabella's shoulders screamed and her soft hands were raw. The other women worked nearby, their movements efficient and practiced, occasionally glancing over with expressions ranging from pity to amusement. "Your hands are like a baby's," commented a younger woman named Ayana, whose own hands were strong and calloused. "How did you keep a husband with such useless hands?" "White women have servants," another added, not unkindly, but with clear disdain for such softness. Isabella gritted her teeth and kept grinding. Sweat dripped into her eyes despite the morning cool. When she paused to flex her cramping fingers, Nayeli appeared at her shoulder. "In the white world, you stop when you tire. Here, you stop when the work is done or you die. Which will you choose?" Isabella bent back to the grinding stone. Blood from her blisters mixed with the mesquite flour, but she said nothing. Around her, the women's chatter continued in a mix of Apache and Spanish, deliberately excluding her. She caught Dakota's name several times, always followed by glances her way. By midday, the sun was brutal. They moved to the shade, but the work continued, now preparing the ground mesquite into cakes that would keep through winter. Isabella's fingers fumbled with the unfamiliar technique, producing misshapen lumps while the other women created perfect rounds. Like this. Ayana finally took pity, showing her the proper motion. Press with the heel of your hand, not your fingers. Use your body's weight, not just your arms. It helped, marginally. Isabella managed a few acceptable cakes before Nayeli called her away for the next task, gathering wood. This seemed easier until she realized it meant hiking into the hills, searching for specific types that burned clean and long, then carrying heavy loads back to camp. The afternoon stretched endlessly. Every muscle in Isabella's body protested. Her fine traveling clothes from yesterday seemed like items from another life, another world. The Apache dress, practical as it was, felt strange against her skin, and the moccasins offered little protection from sharp rocks and thorns. She was struggling with a particularly heavy load of juniper when Dakota appeared on the trail above her. He moved silently despite his wound, materializing from the landscape like part of it. "You're bleeding," he observed, nodding to her hands. "I'm working," she replied stubbornly, adjusting the burden basket straps across her forehead. Something flickered in his eyes' approval. Perhaps. He fell into step beside her, not offering to help carry her load. That would shame them both. She understood instinctively. "The women test you harshly. he said after a moment. As they should. I claimed a place I haven't earned. Most white women would have given up by now, demanded special treatment. Isabella laughed, though it came out more like a gasp. And where would that get me? Nayeli would probably stake me out for the ants. She might, Dakota agreed, and Isabella couldn't tell if he was joking. They walked in silence until they reached a small spring hidden among the rocks. Dakota gestured for her to set down her load and rest. Isabella nearly wept with relief as the weight lifted from her shoulders. "Let me see," he said, reaching for her hands. She hesitated, then placed them in his own hands were scarred and hard from years of weapon use, but his touch was unexpectedly gentle as he examined her blisters and cuts. "These will callous in time," he said, "but they need tending now, or infection will set in." He produced a small leather pouch from his belt and began applying some kind of salve. It stung at first, then soothed. Isabella watched his face as he worked, noting the concentration in his expression, the way his brows drew together. "Your wound," she said. "How is it?" "Healing." He didn't look up from his work. "Nayeli knows healing ways passed down from grandmothers to granddaughters, better than white man's medicine." "She seems to know many things." "She does. She also knows you interest me, which is why she pushes you so hard." Isabella's breath caught. "I interest you." Now he did look up, his dark eyes unreadable. "You are a puzzle, soft but not weak, afraid but not cowardly. You adapt quickly for one raised in comfort." "I wasn't raised in comfort," Isabella said quietly. "My father was a failed prospector who drank away what little he found. I know hunger, cold, disappointment. I married Jonathan partly for love, partly to escape that life. The softness you see is only a few years deep." Understanding dawned in his expression. "That's why you could kill those men. You've seen desperation before." "Yes." He finished with her hands and sat back, but didn't move away. The spring gurgled nearby, and somewhere a hawk cried. The moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken things. "Your dress needs mending," he said finally, gesturing to where yesterday's violence had left tears in the deerskin. "I don't know how. White women's needlework doesn't apply to hide." "I'll show you, tonight, after the evening meal." It was a simple offer, but something in it felt significant. Among the Apache. Isabella was learning. Men and women had their own spheres, but they overlapped in ways white society would find scandalous. A warrior might teach a woman to mend gear, just as a woman might teach a man which plants healed and which killed. "Ayana watches us," Isabella noted, spotting the young woman on a ridge above. "Let her watch. Let them all watch. They need to see that my protection is not just words, but action." He helped her resettle the burden basket, his hands steadying the load. As they returned to camp, Isabella felt the weight of eyes upon them, measuring, judging, waiting to see if the white woman would break. The evening meal was communal, the band gathering around the central fire. Isabella's attempts at cooking had produced barely edible results, but she noticed Dakota ate what she offered without complaint. It was a small gesture, but the women noticed. Everything was noticed here, every interaction weighed and measured. After the meal, as promised, Dakota brought sinew and bone needles to their wickiup. By firelight, he showed her how Apache women mended tears in hide, not the decorative stitching she knew, but strong, functional work that would hold under stress. "The sinew must be damp, but not wet," he explained, his hands guiding hers. "Too dry and it breaks, too wet and it won't hold." Isabella tried to focus on the lesson, but she was acutely aware of his proximity, of the way the firelight played across his features. His wound had been rebound with fresh bandages, and she could smell the medicinal herbs Nayeli had used. "You're different from what I expected," she said as she struggled with a particularly difficult stitch. "What did you expect?" She considered. "The newspapers paint Apache warriors as savage, brutal. without mercy or kindness. We can be all those things, he said simply, when protecting our people, our lands, our way of life. But we are also fathers, brothers, sons. We laugh, we grieve, we love. Do you? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Love. I mean, his hand stilled on the hide. I did, once. The pain in those two words was unmistakable. Isabella waited, not pressing. Her name was Elu. It means full of grace. We were to marry. But the soldiers came to our winter camp. She was gathering water. He stopped, jaw tight. They shot her for sport, to see if they could hit a moving target at distance. I'm sorry, Isabella whispered, the words pitifully inadequate. She was 16 winters. His voice was flat, controlled. The soldiers were never punished. Their captain said it was unfortunate, but such things happen in war. He looked at her directly. Tell me, Isabella rose. Where is the savagery in the Apache who mourns his dead, or in the white man who kills for amusement? You know my answer. You are white, your people? Killed my husband for profit, she interrupted. Would sell me like cattle to the highest bidder. Would see me dead now for the crime of refusing to submit. Yes, I'm white, but I'm here. Aren't I learning your ways, earning my place? They stared at each other across the small fire. Then Dakota nodded slowly. Yes, he said, you are here. He showed her a few more stitches, then rose to leave. At the entrance, he paused. Tomorrow, Nayeli will take the women to gather pinon nuts. The work is hard, but the mountains are cooler. Your hands need time to heal before they can harden. It was as close to kindness as Apache life allowed, Isabella realized. She touched her newly mended dress, feeling the strength of the stitches. Dakota, she called as he turned to go. What does your name mean? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Friend to all, as I told you when we met. But that's not your real name. Is it not your Apache name? The smile faded. No, my Apache name was stripped from me when I put on pieces of the white man's uniform, when I tried to walk between worlds as my brother did. Now I am just Dakota, friend to all, belonging to none. You belong here, Isabella said firmly. These are your people. Yes, but I am changed. As you are changing, the desert remakes us all. He studied her for a long moment. Perhaps that is why the spirits brought us together. Two people caught between worlds, belonging fully to neither. After he left, Isabella sat by the dying fire, flexing her bandaged hands. They hurt, but it was good pain, the pain of becoming something new, something stronger. She thought of her soft life in Phoenix, the tea parties and social calls, the suffocating expectations and restrictions. Had it really been only yesterday she'd fled that life? Already it seemed distant, unreal, like a story that had happened to someone else. Outside, she could hear the camp settling for the night. A baby fussed and was soothed. Men's voices rose and fell in quiet conversation, normal sounds of a community at peace, despite the constant threat of soldiers, settlers, and starvation. Isabella emerged from the wickiup to tend to necessities and found Aiyana by the water baskets. You did well today, the younger woman said grudgingly. Most white women would have cried and quit. I wanted to, Isabella admitted. Aiyana smiled slightly. But you didn't. That matters. She paused, then added quietly. Dakota is a good man, wounded in spirit since Elu died, but good. He deserves truth, not convenience. The warning was clear. Isabella met her gaze steadily. I may have claimed him from necessity, but I stay from choice. That's the only truth I can offer. It's more than some would give. Aiyana gathered her water and turned to go, then looked back. Your stitches are clumsy but strong. He taught you well. Alone under the vast desert stars, Isabella contemplated the strange turns her life had taken. Yesterday she'd been a fugitive. Today she was, what, not Apache, but no longer fully white. Not Dakota's woman in truth, but bound to him by blood and words and growing understanding. She looked at her bandaged hands, thought of the scars they'd carry, marks of transformation, of becoming, in the white world. Smooth hands marked a lady. Here, scarred hands marked a survivor. The choice, when framed that way, was no choice at all. Isabella Rose went back to her wickiup, to her blankets on the hard ground, to her new life measured in blisters and small victories. Tomorrow would bring more tests, more pain, more chances to fail or grow. But tonight, with the desert wind singing through the canyon and her hands bearing the medicine of a warrior's care, she felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. Not for an easy life or a safe one, but for a true life, earned one callus at a time, built on something stronger than society's approval or a rich man's protection. Built on her own 2 hands, scarred and strong. Built on trust growing slowly between 2 wounded souls. Built on the invisible wounds that, in healing, might make them both whole. Asterisk, asterisk. Part 4. When lips meet upon the battlefield, asterisk, asterisk. 2 weeks had passed like water through sand. Isabella's hands bore new calluses over healing blisters, and her body had begun to adapt to the harsh rhythms of Apache life. She could now grind mesquite without her shoulders screaming, gather wood without collapsing, and even her cooking had become passable. But the fragile peace was shattered just after dawn. "Riders coming!" The scout's cry sent the camp into controlled chaos. Women grabbed children and essential supplies, heading for prearranged hiding spots in the rocks. Warriors materialized with weapons, their faces grim. Isabella found herself swept along with the women, but Dakota intercepted her. "Not the usual hiding place," he said tersely. "They're tracking you specifically." Her blood ran cold. Harriman's men? 8 riders, armed heavily. They've been asking in the settlements about a white woman taken by Apaches. His jaw tightened. "They offer gold for information." Nayeli appeared at Isabella's elbow. "The spirits test us," she said cryptically. "Come." They led Isabella to a narrow crevice in the canyon wall, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Inside, it opened into a small cave, defensible but with no back exit. "Stay here," Dakota commanded. "No matter what you hear." "I won't hide while others fight for me," Isabella protested. "You will." His voice brooked no argument. "These men want you alive. My people they would kill without thought. Your presence endangers everyone." The truth of it stung, but she couldn't deny it. Isabella pressed back into the cave as Dakota prepared to leave. "Wait." She caught his arm. "Be careful. Harriman doesn't just want me back, he wants revenge for his men. He'll have ordered them to kill anyone who helped me." Something passed between them. Unspoken, but understood. Then Dakota was gone, melting into the landscape like smoke. Isabella crouched in the darkness, straining to hear. The camp had gone eerily quiet. Even the dogs had been silenced. Minutes crawled by like hours. Then gunfire. Not the sporadic shooting of a skirmish, but sustained volleys. Isabella pressed her hands over her ears, but couldn't block out the sounds, rifles cracking, men shouting, horses screaming. She thought of Ayana, who'd begun teaching her beadwork, of little Bidzil, who followed her around chattering in a mix of Apache and English, of Nayeli, stern but fair, who'd yesterday nodded approval at Isabella's properly tanned rabbit hide. The shooting intensified. Closer now. Isabella peered out of the crevice and bit back a gasp. She could see the main camp from here. See Harriman's men taking cover behind overturned wagons they'd brought as shields. The Apache warriors used the terrain to their advantage, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Then she saw him. Not Harriman himself, but Jack Thornton's brother Samuel. She'd thought Jack dead from Dakota's knife, but apparently he'd survived long enough to name his attacker. Samuel's face was twisted with rage as he directed the assault. "Find the woman," she heard him shout. "Burn them out if you have to, but find her." One of the wiki-ups was already ablaze. Isabella watched in horror as the fire spread, driven by the morning wind. The smoke would force the hidden women and children from cover. She couldn't stay hidden, not while people who'd taken her in died for the crime of showing mercy. Isabella squeezed out of the crevice, staying low. The rifle Dakota had taught her to shoot leaned against a rock where someone had dropped it. She grabbed it, checking the load with hands that barely trembled. Jonathan had taught her to shoot rabbits back when they'd first married, when game meant the difference between eating and starving. But rabbits didn't shoot back. She belly-crawled to a better position, using skills learned gathering piñon nuts in hostile terrain. From here, she could see Samuel Thornton clearly, could see him directing two men toward the rocks where the women hid. Isabella sighted down the barrel. Jonathan's gentle voice in her memory, "Squeeze, don't pull. Breathe out slowly. Let the shot surprise you." The rifle bucked against her shoulder. Samuel Thornton spun and fell, clutching his leg. His men scattered for cover, their advance on the women's position forgotten. "Up there," one of them spotted her muzzle flash. "The woman's up there." Bullets whined off the rocks around her. Isabella rolled aside, scrambling for new cover. She'd given away her position but drawn fire from the hidden families. Fair trade. She made it 3 yards before a hand grabbed her ankle. One of Harriman's men had circled around. His face was young, scared, but his grip was iron as he dragged her down. "Got her," he yelled. "I got—" Dakota's knife took him in the throat. The warrior materialized from nowhere, blood streaming from a gash on his temple. He hauled Isabella to her feet. "I told you to stay hidden." "They were going for the women." He didn't argue, just pulled her behind a boulder as more bullets sought them. His breathing was labored, and she saw blood soaking through his shirt. The old wound had reopened. "Can you reload?" He nodded to the rifle. Isabella's hands moved automatically, lessons learned by campfire light taking over. Around them, the battle raged. The Apache fought with desperate fury, but the attackers' modern weapons and military tactics were taking their toll. "There," she pointed to where 3 men were trying to flank their position. Dakota rose smoothly, his movements liquid despite his injuries. 3 shots, 3 men down, but the effort cost him. He sagged against the boulder, face gray. "You're hurt." Isabella pressed her hand to his side, felt the warm wetness of blood. Not important." He pushed her hand away. "They're regrouping, making a final push. You need to—" A war cry cut him off. Not Apache, but white men's voices raised in bloodlust. The remaining attackers charged in a group, firing as they came. What happened next blurred in Isabella's memory. Dakota shoved her down as bullets chewed rock splinters around them. She heard him grunt, saw him stagger. The rifle fell from his hands. "No." Isabella caught him as he fell, his weight bearing them both to the ground. Samuel Thornton limped into view, his leg bandaged but his gun steady. Well, the runaway widow and her pet savage. His smile was cruel. "Mister, Harriman wants you back. Mrs. Rose wants to teach you proper respect. But your Apache boy, he's got no use for him." He raised his gun toward Dakota's head. Isabella didn't think. She threw herself forward, covering Dakota with her body. "You want me alive? Then you deal with me. Leave him." "Touching." Samuel's laugh was ugly. "Tell you what, you come quiet-like, and I'll make it quick for him. 1 shot, clean, otherwise—" He gestured to his men. "We'll take our time. Let you watch." Isabella felt Dakota's hand grip her arm, trying to push her away. But he was too weak. His blood soaked through her dress, warm and terrifying. "I'll come," she said. "Just let me say goodbye." Samuel shrugged. 1 minute, then we ride." Isabella bent to Dakota, her hair falling around them like a curtain. His eyes were glazed with pain, but aware. "Go," he whispered. "Live. Not without you." She pressed her forehead to his. "Trust me." Then she kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, fierce, a claiming and a promise all at once. She tasted blood and dust and something essentially him. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just this two souls touching across all the barriers that should have kept them apart. When she pulled back, Dakota's eyes were wide, shocked. "I'm sorry," she breathed against his lips. Then she palmed the small knife from his belt and spun, driving it up under Samuel Thornton's ribs before he could react. Thornton's eyes went wide. The gun fell from nerveless fingers. You... "Savage," Isabella suggested, twisting the knife. "Yes, I suppose I am now." Thornton fell, but his men were already raising their weapons. Isabella knew she was about to die. At least she'd die free. Die fighting. Die having chosen her fate. The Apache war cry that split the air was the sweetest sound she'd ever heard. Karuk himself led the charge, the warriors who'd been holding the high ground now descending like an avalanche. The remaining attackers, seeing their leader dead and reinforcements arriving, broke and ran. Only 2 made it to their horses. Isabella stayed with Dakota as the warriors gave chase. His breathing was shallow. His skin cooled despite the morning heat. She pressed both hands to his wounds, willing the blood to stop. "Stay with me," she commanded. "You don't get to leave now. Not after—" Her voice broke. His hand found hers, weak but present. "Isabella." "Don't talk. Save your strength." Nayeli appeared with her medicine bundle, roughly pushing Isabella aside. The older woman's face was grim as she examined Dakota's wounds. "Fad," she pronounced, "but I've seen worse survive. If he's strong enough, if he wants to live enough." She set to work with brutal efficiency, packing wounds with herbs, binding ribs, forcing bitter tea between his lips. Isabella helped where she could, followed orders, tried not to think about how still he lay. The sun climbed toward noon before Nayeli sat back. "Now we wait. The spirits will decide." Isabella looked around the camp for the first time since the battle ended. Bodies lay where they'd fallen, all Harriman's men. But the Apache had paid too. She saw women keening over 2 dead warriors, saw others tending wounded. The burned wickiup still smoldered. "This is my fault," she said hollowly. "They came for me." "Yes." Nayeli's agreement was blunt. "But you fought for us, killed for us, again." She looked at Dakota's unconscious form. "And you claimed him true this time." Not with words for survival, but with actions. Isabella flushed, remembering that desperate kiss. "I didn't mean—" "Didn't you?" Nayeli's eyes were knowing. The heart speaks truest when death is close. You chose him, chose us. Now we see if he chooses to stay. They moved Dakota to their wickiup, made him as comfortable as possible. Isabella refused to leave his side. She bathed his fevered skin, dribbled water between cracked lips, talked to him in the darkness. She told him about Jonathan, about her father, about dreams she'd never spoken aloud. She described the California ranch she'd never see, the children she'd hoped to have, the life that had been stolen from her. "But maybe," she whispered as the second night deepened, "maybe that was never my true path. Maybe I was always meant to end up here, in this place, with you." On the 3rd dawn, Dakota's fever broke. His eyes opened, focused, found hers. "You stayed," he said, voice rough as sand. "Where else would I go?" She tried for lightness. Failed. "You're stuck with me now, warrior. I killed for you, claimed you with more than words." His hand lifted weakly to touch her face. The kiss. Heat flooded her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I know it was—" "Truth," he finished. "It was truth." They stared at each other, the world holding its breath. Then Dakota pulled her down and kissed her properly, slow and deep and full of promise. When they parted,
Both were breathless. "When I heal," he said, "we will speak of this, of us, of what comes next." "When you heal," Isabella agreed. Outside, the camp was stirring. There would be ceremonies for the dead, preparations for retaliation from Harriman, decisions about whether the band could stay or must flee deeper into the mountains. But for now, in the quiet of dawn, Isabella Rose sat beside the warrior she'd claimed and who'd claimed her in return. Her hands were scarred, her white life in ashes, her future uncertain. She'd never been happier. The battlefield had tested them both, stripping away pretense and propriety. What remained was truth, sharp as a blade, clean as desert wind, strong as the love growing between two souls who should never have met. Samuel Thornton's blood had sealed it. Dakota's kiss had blessed it. And the desert, patient and eternal, had witnessed it all. Asterisk, asterisk. Part 5, The Truth and Secrets in the Blood. Asterisk, asterisk. The moon hung like a silver dollar over the Apache camp. 3 weeks after the battle, Dakota had healed enough to walk, though Isabella still caught him wincing when he thought she wasn't looking. They'd fallen into a rhythm, she tending his recovery, he teaching her the deeper ways of survival. But neither had spoken of the kiss, of the promises made in blood and desperation. Tonight, that careful distance would shatter. Isabella was mending a water basket when Ayanna burst into the wickiup, her face tight with urgency. "Riders approach under white flag. They bring a message." She paused, eyes flicking between Isabella and Dakota. "They wear Harriman's brand." Dakota was on his feet instantly, reaching for his rifle. Isabella caught his arm. "If they come under truce, Harriman's men know no honor," he said flatly. "This is a trap." But Karuk had already made the decision. The chief stood at the camp's edge as 3 riders approached, their torch flames dancing in the darkness. Isabella recognized the lead rider, Marcus Webb, Harriman's lawyer, a cold, calculating man who did his violence with papers and threats rather than guns. "I seek the white woman, Isabella Rose." Webb called out, "I bring an offer from Mr. Harriman." "Speak," Karuk commanded, "but know that she is under our protection." Webb's smile was thin. "For now." He pulled out a leather portfolio. "Mr. Harriman is a reasonable man. He offers terms. The woman returns voluntarily, agrees to marriage, and he'll call off the hunt. No more attacks on your people. No more blood." "And if she refuses?" Dakota had moved silently to stand behind Isabella, his presence a warm shield. "Then he'll petition the army. Tell them she's a captive, that you savages are holding a white woman against her will." Webb's eyes glittered. "How long before the cavalry comes? How many of your people will die for harboring one woman?" Isabella felt the weight of eyes upon her. The entire band had gathered, understanding enough English to grasp the threat. Children she'd come to care for pressed against their mother's skirts. Warriors she'd fought beside fingered their weapons. "There's more," Webb continued, enjoying the moment. "Information misses. Rose should hear about her late husband, about why Mr. Harriman particularly desires this union." Despite herself, Isabella stepped forward. "Jonathan's death was necessary." Webb finished. "You see, your husband discovered something unfortunate. Mr. Harriman's claim to his largest ranch is questionable. Forged documents, murdered Mexican owners. Your husband had proof, was going to the federal authorities." Isabella's blood ran cold. "So Harriman killed him?" "Poisoned him? Yes. But here's the interesting part." Webb's smile widened. "Your husband hid the documents, hid them where only his beloved wife would think to look. Mr. Harriman needs you alive, needs you cooperative to find those papers." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The forced marriage wasn't just about possession, it was about protection. A wife couldn't testify against her husband,
And once Harriman had the documents, he'll kill me the moment he has them, Isabella said. Webb shrugged. Perhaps, but consider the alternative. The army burns this camp. Everyone dies. All for papers you may not even be able to find. Get out. Dakota's voice was deadly quiet. Take your threats and go. 3 days. Webb called as he turned his horse. Mister, Harriman gives you 3 days to decide. After that, he made a slashing gesture across his throat. The camp erupted in argument the moment the riders disappeared. Some wanted to flee deeper into the mountains. Others spoke of fighting. A few looked at Isabella with expressions that said clearer than words one white woman wasn't worth the tribe's destruction. Isabella stood frozen, the weight of revelation crushing her. Jonathan had died protecting evidence. Now others would die if she didn't surrender. But if she did, Harriman would never be stopped. How many more would suffer under his greed? Come. Dakota led her away from the crowd, up to a ridge overlooking the camp. You need to think clearly, away from fear and anger. They sat in silence, watching the camp below. Finally, Isabella spoke. I know where they are. The documents. She touched the leather bag she still carried. Jonathan sewed them into the lining of his journal. I've been carrying them all along. Dakota's intake of breath was sharp. You're certain? He told me. When he was dying. I thought it was fever talk. She laughed bitterly. I've been carrying my own death warrant. Show me. Isabella carefully slit the journal's lining with Dakota's knife. Papers spilled out deeds. Testimonies, a federal marshal's half-finished report. Everything needed to destroy Harriman, all covered in rusty brown stains. Jonathan's blood, from those final terrible hours. This changes things, Dakota said slowly. With these, Harriman isn't just a danger to you, he's a danger to everyone. My people, the Mexican families, anyone who stands in his way. But who would believe us, an Apache warrior and a runaway widow, against the richest man in the territory? Dakota was quiet for a long moment. Then, there's something I haven't told you, about why I wore pieces of uniform, about my brother's death. Isabella waited, sensing the weight of what was coming. My brother didn't just scout for the army. He worked with a federal marshal, investigating land frauds. Harriman's name came up often. His voice turned bitter. When my brother got too close, Harriman arranged for him to be shot by his own unit, called it a tragic mistake. The air between them crackled with shared pain, shared purpose. Then we both have reason to see him destroyed. Yes. Dakota studied the documents. There's a fort 2 days' ride north, Fort Buchanan. The commander there, Colonel Morrison, is known to be honest. If we could get these to him. Harriman would never let us get close. No, but he's expecting you to run or surrender, not attack. Isabella looked at him sharply. Attack? He'll be at his ranch for the next week. I have this from our scouts. Preparing for your surrender, no doubt. Dakota's smile was sharp as a blade. He's sent most of his men hunting you. His defenses are weak. You're suggesting we go to him. I'm suggesting we end this, one way or another. Isabella thought of the camp below, of the children who deserved to grow up free, of the women who'd accepted her despite everything. Then she thought of Jonathan, poisoned and dying, spending his last breath trying to protect others. Yes, she said simply. They spent the next 2 days preparing. The plan was dangerous, possibly suicidal. A small group would infiltrate Harriman's ranch while the main band moved to safer territory. If they succeeded, the documents would reach Colonel Morrison. If they failed, Isabella tried not to think about failure. The night before they left, Nayeli came to their wickiup. You go to almost certain death, the older woman said bluntly. It's time for truth between you. She left as suddenly as she'd come. Isabella and Dakota sat awkwardly in the following silence. She's not wrong, Isabella finally said. We've danced around it since the battle. You kissed me thinking we would die. I kissed you because I wanted to, because in that moment, facing death, pretense seemed foolish. She met his eyes. Was I wrong?
No. The word came out rough. But Isabella, what can I offer you? I'm a man between worlds, claimed by neither. You could have safety with your own kind.
Safety with my own kind. Her laugh was bitter. My own kind murdered my husband. My own kind would sell me like property. My own kind see your people as less than human. She moved closer. You ask what you can offer freedom. Truth, a life earned rather than given. It will be hard. If we survive, if Harriman falls, you'll still be a white woman who chose an Apache. Both worlds will judge you. Let them. Isabella touched his face, felt him lean into her palm. I've been judged my whole life. Too poor, then too ambitious, then too independent. At least with you, I'm judged for choices I made freely. He caught her hand, pressed it to his lips. When this is over, we'll have time for promises. Isabella interrupted. For now, she leaned in, and he met her halfway. This kiss was different from the battlefield desperation. It was slow, deep, an exploration and affirmation. When they parted, both were breathing unsteadily. Whatever happens tomorrow, Isabella whispered. I want you to know, these weeks with your people, with you I've been more myself than ever before. You gave me that. You gave yourself that, he corrected. I merely didn't stand in your way. They held each other through the night, not as lovers but as warriors preparing for battle, drawing strength from shared warmth and shared purpose. Dawn came too soon. 6 would ride Isabella, Dakota, and 4 warriors, including the one who'd first challenged them on that distant night. The documents were divided between them, copies hidden with trusted allies. If any survived, word would reach the colonel. As they prepared to leave, Kuruk approached. You ride to settle blood debt, the chief said formally. This is honorable, but know this succeed or fail. You have a place here, both of you. It was more than Isabella had dared hope for. She bowed deeply, Apache fashion, then mounted her horse. The war party rode out as the sun painted the mountains red as blood. Behind them, the camp was already packing to move. Ahead lay Harriman's ranch, the man who'd taken so much from both of them. Isabella checked her rifle, touched the knife at her belt, beside her. Dakota rode in focused silence. Around them, the desert waited and watched. No regrets, Dakota asked as they paused at a ridge, the last point where they could turn back. None, Isabella replied. She thought of Jonathan, of Dakota's brother, of all the unnamed victims of Harriman's greed. It's time for truth, time for justice. Justice or revenge. Is there a difference? Dakota considered, perhaps not, but if we seek only revenge, we become what we fight. If we seek justice, he touched the documents in his saddlebag. Then perhaps the deaths mean something. They rode on, 6 figures against the vast desert, carrying proof of murders and lies, riding toward either triumph or destruction. The sun climbed higher, and somewhere ahead, Samuel Harriman waited in his stolen kingdom, never suspecting that his victims' ghosts rode toward him on desert wind. Isabella had fled as prey. She returned as predator. The transformation was complete, sealed in Apache blood and blessing, proved in battle and choice. Now only the final test remained. Asterisk, asterisk. Part 6. Facing the enemy, asterisk, asterisk. Harriman's ranch sprawled across the valley like a cancer on the land, thousands of acres stolen through murder and forgery, marked by iron fences and armed riders. From their position in the hills above, Isabella counted only 12 guards. Dakota had been right. Most of Harriman's men were still scouring the territory for her. There,
Dakota pointed to a small adobe structure near the main house. The old Mission Bell Tower. One of our people works in the stables. He says Harriman uses it as his private office. Isabella studied the layout through Dakota's field glass. The main house sat like a fortress, all thick walls and narrow windows. But the bell tower stood apart, connected by a covered walkway. Arrogant isolation, Harriman felt so secure he'd separated himself from his guards. The shift changes at sunset. One of the warriors, Neil, reported. For perhaps 10 minutes, the patrols overlap at the bunkhouse. Our window. Dakota agreed. He looked at Isabella. You're certain you want to do this? You could wait here. We've discussed this. Her voice brooked no argument. Harriman knows my face, my voice. If anyone can get close enough, it's me. The plan was simple in its desperation. Isabella would approach openly, apparently surrendering. While Harriman gloated over his prize, the others would position themselves. When she gave the signal, "Remember," Dakota said, catching her hands. "If something goes wrong, if you can't reach the tower—" "I run, I know." She squeezed his fingers. "But nothing will go wrong." They both knew it for a lie, but sometimes lies were all the comfort available. As the sun touched the western mountains, painting the ranch in deceptive gold, Isabella began her descent. She'd changed back into what remained of her original traveling dress, the Apache clothing hidden beneath. Her hair was pinned in a mockery of propriety, her father's derringer hidden in her bodice. To any observer, she looked like what Harriman expected a defeated woman come to accept her fate. The first guard to spot her nearly shot her from pure startlement. "Hold," she called, raising empty hands. "I'm Isabella Rose. Mr. Harriman is expecting me." Word spread like wildfire. Guards converged, rifles trained on her as if she were an army herself. Perhaps, in a way, she was the army of the dead, come to collect what was owed. Marcus Webb emerged from the main house, his satisfaction obvious. "Mrs. Rose, how sensible of you to accept Mr. Harriman's generous offer." "I want guarantees," Isabella said, pitching her voice to Carrie. "The Apache who helped me are not to be harmed." Of course. Webb's agreement came too easily. "Mr. Harriman is a man of his word. Come, he's waiting in his office." The walk to the bell tower felt endless. Isabella noted everything: guard positions, windows, the stable boy, who might or might not be Dakota's contact, watching from the shadows. Her heart hammered, but her steps remained steady. The tower office was everything she'd expected: opulent furniture, thick carpets, walls lined with the trophies of Harriman's conquests, legal documents, photographs with territorial politicians, a map marked with the borders of his empire. And behind a massive oak desk, Samuel Harriman himself. He was smaller than she'd remembered, as if evil had begun to consume him from within. His pale eyes glittered with triumph as he rose to greet her. "Isabella, at last." He moved to pour whiskey from a crystal decanter. "I trust your time with the savages has taught you the value of civilization." "It's taught me many things." She accepted the glass but didn't drink. "Indeed. Well, you'll have plenty of time to forget those lessons." He returned to his desk, pulling out a thick document. "Our marriage contract. Sign it, and this unpleasantness ends." Isabella moved closer, pretending to read the papers. Through the window, she caught a flash of movement. Dakota and the others were in position. "There's one thing," she said, stalling. "My late husband left some papers, business documents. I'd like them returned." Harriman's eyes sharpened. "Papers?" "Nothing important to you, I'm sure, just memories." She let her voice break artfully. "Surely you can grant a widow that small comfort." "You have them." He leaned forward eagerly, too eagerly. "These papers." Isabella reached into her bag slowly, aware of Webb's hand hovering near his gun.
She pulled out Jonathan's journal, the real one, not the documents hidden with the warriors. "Just his journal," she said, "but he mentioned other papers, said they were important." Harriman snatched the journal, rifling through it. His face darkened when he found nothing but Jonathan's gentle observations about desert flowers and Apache customs. "Where are they?" His civilized mask slipped. "The documents your husband stole." "Stole?" Isabella let surprise color her voice. "Jonathan never stole anything in his life." "Don't play games." Harriman slammed his hand on the desk. "He had proof documents that belonged to me. Where are they?" This was it. The moment to spring the trap. Isabella's hand moved to her throat. The agreed-upon signal. The door burst open. Not Dakota, but one of Harriman's guards. "Sir, Apache warriors approaching from the north. At least 20. Harriman's face went white, then red. "You treacherous!" He lunged for his desk drawer. "For the pistol there." Isabella moved faster. The derringer appeared in her hand like magic, pressed against Harriman's throat before he could draw. "Don't," she said quietly. "Webb, drop your gun." The lawyer compiled, eyes wide. "Outside." Shouts erupted as Dakota's warriors revealed themselves, but something was wrong there. Should only be 6, not 20. "Kuruk," Dakota said from the doorway, and Isabella's heart sank. The chief had followed them, bringing warriors. The simple infiltration had become a war party. "You brought them here," Harriman snarled. "You'll hang for this. They'll all hang." With what authority? Isabella pressed the derringer harder. "A forged deed, a murdered federal marshal's blood on your hands. Oh yes, I know about that too, about Dakota's brother, about the Mexican families, about Jonathan. How many, Harriman, how many have died for your greed?" "You can't prove anything." "Can't I?" Dakota stepped fully into the room, and Harriman flinched at the cold fury in his eyes. "Your mistake was keeping records, names, dates, amounts paid to assassins." He pulled papers from his shirt, copies of the documents, all verified by your own hand. Webb made a sound like a dying animal. "You said those were destroyed." "I lied." Harriman's composure cracked entirely. "Just like I lied about letting the savages go free. Did you think I'd let witnesses live? I've already sent word to Fort Buchanan. The Army will." "Do nothing," a new voice interrupted. Colonel Morrison of Fort Buchanan entered, flanked by soldiers. Behind him, the stable boy, who apparently was much more than that, grinned at Dakota. "Seems your messenger reached me after all, ma'am," the colonel said to Isabella, "along with some very interesting documents." The room froze in tableau. Isabella with her gun at Harriman's throat, Dakota ready to strike, soldiers filling the doorway. Outside, Apache warriors faced off against ranch guards who suddenly looked very uncertain about their loyalties. "You can't," Harriman whispered. "I own judges, senators. I made this territory." "You stole this territory," Morrison corrected. "And your friends in high places are already distancing themselves. Amazing how quickly rats abandon a sinking ship." "Lower your weapon, Mrs. Rose," the colonel said gently. "Let the law handle this." Isabella met Dakota's eyes. The law had failed Jonathan, failed Dakota's brother, failed countless others. But perhaps, with the right pressure, it could finally serve justice. She stepped back, lowering the derringer. Harriman sagged in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 60 years. "Samuel Harriman," Morrison said formally. "You're under arrest for murder, fraud, and conspiracy. Mr. Webb, you as well." As soldiers moved to secure the prisoners, Harriman made one last desperate play. A hidden gun appeared from beneath his desk, not aimed at the soldiers or Isabella, but at Dakota. "If I burn, savage, you burn with—" The shot was impossibly loud in the confined space. Harriman looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, then at Isabella, who stood with smoke curling from her derringer. "That's for Jonathan," she said quietly. And for all the others. Harriman toppled forward across his stolen empire's map, blood pooling over territories he'd never truly owned. Webb fainted. Colonel Morrison sighed. Self-defense. Clearly, the prisoner drew on a federal witness. He looked between Isabella and Dakota. I assume you'll both testify to what you know.
Every word,
Isabella promised. The aftermath moved quickly. Ranch guards, faced with Apache warriors and federal troops, surrendered without further violence. Webb, revived and babbling, confirmed every detail in exchange for consideration. Documents were seized, including records that implicated a dozen other land thieves. As dawn broke, Isabella stood with Dakota on the hill overlooking the ranch. Below, soldiers were already cataloging evidence. Some of Harriman's cowboys, learning their wages had come from blood money, were making restitution deals. The stolen empire was crumbling. It's done, she said, hardly believing it. The beginning is done, Dakota corrected. Now comes the harder part. Living with what we've done. Building what comes after. Karuk approached, his weathered face showing approval. You fought well, both of you. The council has decided the white woman may stay with the people, if she chooses, as wife to Dakota, if that is her path. Isabella felt Dakota tense beside her. They danced around this, but now, that's her choice to make. Dakota said carefully, she's free now, truly free. She could go anywhere, be anything. I could, Isabella agreed. She turned to face him fully. I have Jonathan's inheritance waiting in California. I have skills now, thanks to your people. I could make a life anywhere. She stepped closer. But I choose here. I choose the people who took me in when I had nothing. I choose the man who showed me who I could become.
Isabella.
Unless you don't. He silenced her with a kiss that tasted of desert wind and freedom, of battles fought and won, of a future neither could have imagined when they first met over blood and desperation. When they parted, Karuk was smiling, a rare sight. It seems the spirits knew what they were doing after all. As the sun climbed higher, painting the desert in shades of gold and possibility, Isabella rose widow, killer. Survivor took the hand of the Apache warrior who'd saved her in every way that mattered. Behind them lay an empire of lies in ruins. Ahead lay a life built on truth, struggle, and trust. It would not be easy. The world would not understand. But as Dakota had taught her, the desert cared nothing for easy. It cared only for what was real, what was strong, what could endure. And what they'd built between them, forged in fire, sealed in blood, proven in choice would endure whatever came. The enemy was vanquished. Now came the harder victory, learning to live free. Asterisk, asterisk. Part 7. Blood on the wooden floor. Asterisk, asterisk. The federal courthouse in Tucson stood like a monument to civilization's promise and its failures. 3 weeks had passed since Harriman's death. 3 weeks of depositions, testimonies, and the slow grinding wheels of justice. Isabella stood in the witness room, her appearance a careful balance between worlds. She wore a simple black dress, proper widow's attire, but her hair hung in a single braid, Apache fashion, and her hands bore the calluses of her new life. They're ready for you, Marshal Davidson said. He'd been assigned to protect the witnesses, though Isabella suspected Dakota's presence outside was better security than any federal badge. The courtroom was packed. Word of Harriman's empire's collapse had spread like wildfire, bringing journalists, dispossessed families seeking restitution, and the merely curious. Isabella kept her eyes forward as she took the stand, but she felt the weight of their stares, heard the whispers. The Apache woman, someone muttered. Harriman's killer, another corrected. Both true in their way. The prosecutor, a young man named Thompson, who seemed genuinely committed to justice, led her through the testimony methodically,
The forged documents, the murders, the conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of territorial government. Isabella spoke clearly, calmly, letting the facts damn the dead and living alike. It was the defense attorney, Cornelius Wade, who tried to turn her truth into weapons. "Mrs. Rose," he said with false sympathy, "you've endured terrible trauma, kidnapped by Apache savages, forced to live among them, subjected to who knows what degradations." "Objection," Thompson called. Sustained. Wade smiled thinly. "Let me rephrase. Is it true you now live voluntarily among the Apache?" "Yes. And that you've taken one of them as a—" He paused delicately. "Companion." Isabella met his gaze steadily. "I have accepted Dakota's protection and partnership. Yes." Partnership. Wade's tone made it sound sordid. "And this partnership began while you were his captive." "I was never his captive. The Apache saved my life when Harriman's men would have taken it." "So you say, but perhaps your judgment has been compromised by your ordeal. Perhaps what you think you remember." "I remember," Isabella said, her voice cutting like glass. "My husband's murderer confessing his crimes. I remember finding the evidence that proved it. I remember defending myself when he tried to kill again. What's unclear about that?" The questioning continued for hours. Wade tried every angle, painting her as hysterical, traumatized, corrupted by her time with savages. But Isabella had learned patience from the Apache women, learned to endure without breaking. She answered each attack with calm truth. Finally, Wade played his last card. "You shot Samuel Harriman in cold blood. Didn't you, not in self-defense, but in revenge?" Isabella was silent for a long moment. The courtroom held its breath. "I shot him," she said finally, "because he was about to murder the man who'd saved my life. I shot him because the law had failed to stop him for 20 years. I shot him because sometimes justice comes from a derringer, not a courthouse." She looked directly at the jury. "And I would do it again." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Thompson looked pained. Judge Carter banged his gavel. "The witness will confine herself to facts, not philosophy." But the damage or truth was done. When Isabella finally left the stand, she found Dakota waiting in the hall. He'd dressed in his best clothing, a mix of Apache tradition and American necessity that somehow suited him perfectly. "How bad?" she asked. "You spoke truth. That's never bad, only dangerous." He studied her face. "There's news. A rider came while you testified." Her heart clenched. "The band safe? But there's been trouble at the Bosque Redondo. The Army's moving more bands onto the reservation. Kuruk thinks we may need to relocate deeper into Mexico." Another loss, another forced journey. Isabella felt suddenly tired, worn down by the constant weight of survival. "Hey." Dakota's hand found her cheek. "We knew this was coming. We'll face it as we've faced everything else." She leaned into his touch. "Together." "Together." A commotion in the courtroom cut short the moment. They rushed back to find Chaos Webb. The lawyer who'd turned state's evidence lay gasping on the floor, blood spreading across the wooden boards. A man in expensive clothes stood over him, a smoking pistol in his hand. "Robert Dalton," someone whispered. "Harriman's partner in the mining claims." Dalton's wild eyes found Isabella. "You!" he snarled. "You destroyed everything. Do you know how much money—" Marshal Davidson's rifle butt cut short his tirade. As deputies dragged Dalton away and doctors rushed to Webb too late. From the look of it, Isabella stared at the blood soaking into the floorboards. Another death, another layer of violence in this tangled web. "This won't end," she said quietly to Dakota. "There will always be another partner, another avenger, another threat." Judge Carter cleared the courtroom, but not before Isabella heard the whispers starting again. Now she wasn't just Harriman's killer, but a catalyst for more death, more violence. The trial would continue. but its outcome suddenly seemed less certain. That night, in the small room they'd rented near the courthouse, Isabella sat brushing out her hair while Dakota cleaned his rifle, a domestic scene made surreal by its context. "We could leave," she said suddenly. "Tonight, forget the trial, forget the testimony. Just disappear into Mexico with the band." Dakota's hand stilled. "Is that what you want?" "I want to stop looking over my shoulder. I want to stop being a symbol, the white woman who chose Apache justice, the widow who killed for revenge. I want to just be Isabella, living her life." "You can never be just Isabella again," Dakota said gently. "Just as I can never be just Dakota. We've become stories now, whether we wished it or not." A knock interrupted them. Marshal Davidson entered, his face grim. "There's been a development. Dalton's confession he implicated others, many others. The governor's calling for a full investigation." He paused. "They want to put you both into protective custody." "A cage is a cage," Dakota said flatly. "It's for your safety." "Our safety lies with our people," Isabella interrupted. "Thank you, Marshal, but no." Davidson sighed. "I figured you'd say that. At least let me assign extra guards." "No need." Dakota moved to the window, pointing to shadows that suddenly resolved into Apache warriors. "We have protection." The marshal's eyes widened. "How long have they been there?" "Since we arrived," Isabella said. "The Apache don't abandon their own." After Davidson left, shaking his head, Isabella and Dakota sat in the darkness, each lost in thought. Tomorrow would bring more testimony, more accusations, more blood-soaked revelations. The trial had become something larger than just justice for Harriman's crimes. It was a reckoning for an entire system built on theft and murder. "I need to tell you something," Isabella said finally. "About Jonathan's journal. There was one entry I didn't share with the prosecutors." Dakota waited. "He wrote about a dream he had, near the end, a dream of the desert blooming with justice, of Apache and Mexican and American living as neighbors, not enemies. He wrote that he saw me there, in that dream, standing between worlds." Her voice caught. "He wrote that I would help build bridges." Jonathan was a wise man. Was he, or just naive look where his dreams led to bloodshed in a courtroom, to us forever marked as killers, to... Dakota silenced her with a kiss, fierce and grounding. When they parted, his eyes burned with intensity. To us finding each other, to Harriman's victims getting justice, to truth being spoken in halls that usually hear only lies. Yes, there's blood. There always is when the world changes. But that doesn't make the dream wrong. A shot rang out, shattering the window. Isabella and Dakota rolled apart, finding cover as more bullets peppered the walls. Outside, Apache war cries split the night as the warriors engaged unseen attackers. "So much for federal protection," Isabella muttered, checking her derringer. "They want to silence us before tomorrow's testimony," Dakota said, reading the attack's purpose. "Someone's very afraid of what else might be revealed." The battle was brief but vicious. When it ended, 3 more of Harriman's former associates lay dead in the street. Their attempt at witness assassination failed, but the message was clear: testifying came with a blood price. In the aftermath, as deputies and Apache warriors warily shared the same space, Isabella made a decision. "We finish this," she told Dakota. "We testify. We see justice done as far as the law allows, and then we go home," he finished. "To the band, to the desert, to whatever life we can build between worlds. Even if that life is always shadowed by this. Shadows prove the sun exists," he said simply. "We'll live in both." Dawn came slowly, painting the blood-stained courthouse steps in deceptively gentle light. Isabella and Dakota entered together, Apache warriors and federal marshals forming an unlikely united guard. The gallery was even more packed than before. Word of the night's violence, drawing the morbidly curious. But Isabella noticed something else among the crowd were Apache faces. Mexican families. Small ranchers who'd suffered under Harriman's reign. They'd come to witness, to ensure their stories weren't buried with the dead. As she retook the stand, Isabella felt the weight of their hopes, their need for someone to speak truth in this hall of laws. The blood on the wooden floor had been mopped away, but its stain remained in memory. In consequence, in the price of change. Mrs. Rose, Thompson began. Are you ready to continue your testimony? Isabella looked at Dakota, at the mixed crowd, at the empty spaces where the dead should sit. Then she lifted her chin, her voice clear and carrying. I am. The truth would be told, written in blood and law alike. And when it was done, when justice had taken what form it could, she and Dakota would return to the desert that had remade them both. But they would return, changed again, no longer just survivors or lovers or killers, but something new, bridge builders, perhaps, as Jonathan had dreamed, or simply two people who'd learned that sometimes the price of freedom is blood on wooden floors and the courage to speak truth anyway. The gavel fell, and Isabella began to speak. Asterisk, asterisk, Part 8, The Trail's End and Happiness. Asterisk, asterisk. The desert welcomed them home like a mother embracing her changed children. 6 months had passed since the trial's end. 6 months since the last of Harriman's conspirators had been sentenced. 6 months since Isabella and Dakota had ridden away from Tucson's courthouse for the final time. Now, as their horses picked through familiar canyons, Isabella felt the tight coil in her chest finally begin to loosen. Above, an eagle circled against the endless blue. And somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sound that meant home children laughing. They've moved camp, Dakota observed, reading signs invisible to most. But not far. See the smoke? Isabella smiled. Her eyes had sharpened during their time away, even as her heart had grown both harder and softer. The federal government's protection had come with a price, months of additional testimony, traveling to distant courthouses, reliving trauma for the sake of justice. But it was done now. The stolen lands were being returned, the guilty punished or scattered, the dead as avenged as law could make them. As they rounded the final bend, the camp appeared before them, and Isabella's throat tightened with emotion. The wickiups stood in their familiar pattern, smoke rising from cook fires, women working steadily at daily tasks. But there were changes, 2 new faces among the familiar, refugees from the increasing pressure of Western expansion. Isabella Ayana was the first to spot them, dropping her burden basket to run forward. You've returned. The reunion was a blur of embraces, exclamations, and tears. Nayeli examined them both with sharp eyes, noting the new lines on their faces, the weariness beneath their joy. You carry heavy spirits, she said quietly. Come, there's much to tell, but first you must be cleansed. That night, after the purification ceremony, after the feast of welcome, after the stories had been shared and reshared, Isabella and Dakota finally found themselves alone in their wickiup. It had been maintained in their absence, kept ready for their return, and Isabella felt tears threaten at this simple gesture of faith. Kuruk is dying, Dakota said into the darkness. They'd both seen it, the way the chief moved carefully, the gray tinge to his skin. His sons argue over who will lead. The band may split. And the army, closer every season. The president promises new treaties, but he didn't need to finish. They both knew the value of government promises. Isabella moved into his arms, finding comfort in his solid warmth. What do we do? We live, he said simply. We fight when we must, run when we can't, and hold tight to what matters. And what matters? His hand found her face in the darkness. This, us, the people who've become our family, the life we've built between worlds.
Over the following days, Isabella fell back into the rhythm of Apache life, but with new purpose. The skills she'd learned in courtrooms, reading, writing, understanding white law became tools for the band's survival. She helped draft letters to sympathetic officials, translated government documents, taught the children English alongside their native tongue. "You're preparing them for a world that may destroy them," Nayeli observed one afternoon, watching Isabella work with the youngest students. "I'm preparing them to survive in whatever world comes." Isabella replied, "As you prepared me." The older woman smiled, a rare expression that transformed her weathered face. "You've grown wise, white woman who is no longer white." As summer deepened, changes came swiftly. Kuruk passed in his sleep, peacefully for a warrior who'd expected to die in battle. His elder son, Nalnish, became chief, bringing a more aggressive stance toward the encroaching whites. Some families left, seeking the relative safety of the reservations. Others arrived, driven from their lands by miners and settlers. Through it all, Isabella and Dakota stood as bridges between worlds. When ranchers' cattle wandered into Apache territory, they negotiated their return. When young warriors spoke of raids, they counseled patience and strategy over bloodshed. When government agents came with new treaty offers, they translated not just words, but intentions. It wasn't easy. Isabella faced suspicion from both sides, whites who saw her as a traitor to her race, Apaches who wondered if she might someday betray them back to her own kind. But slowly, season by season, her actions spoke louder than any doubts. The morning that changed everything came in early autumn. Isabella woke feeling strange, unsettled in a way she couldn't name. By midday, when the nausea struck, Nayeli took one look at her and smiled knowingly. "The spirits have blessed you," she said simply. Isabella's hand went to her belly, wonder and fear warring in her chest. A child, Dakota's child, a baby who would belong fully to neither world yet carry both within them. When she told Dakota that evening, he went so still she feared his reaction. Then he pulled her close, his hands trembling as they framed her face. "A child," he whispered. "Our child. Are you happy?" "Happy," he laughed, the sound caught between joy and tears. "I'm terrified, amazed, grateful. The world we're bringing this baby into is the only world we have," Isabella finished. "And we'll teach them to walk between, as we've learned." The pregnancy changed the band's perception of Isabella in subtle but profound ways. She wasn't just the white woman who'd chosen them anymore. She was carrying the future, a child who would be truly of both bloods. Even those who'd remained suspicious began to soften, seeing her commitment written in the most fundamental way possible. Winter came early that year, driving the band into sheltered canyons. Isabella, heavy with child, continued her work teaching, translating, mediating, but as her time approached, Dakota grew increasingly protective. "You need to rest," he insisted one snowy morning, finding her teaching letters to a group of children. "I need to be useful," she countered. "Sitting still won't make the baby come any faster or safer." But that night, as if to prove him right, the pains began. What followed was the longest night of Isabella's life, a battle different from any she'd fought. Nayeli and the midwives attended her while Dakota paced outside like a caged wolf, prevented by custom from entering the birthing lodge. As dawn broke, painting the snow-covered mountains in shades of rose, a new cry joined the desert wind. Isabella, exhausted but triumphant, held her daughter for the first time. "She's perfect," Nayeli pronounced, cleaning the baby gently. "Strong lungs, strong spirit." When Dakota was finally allowed in, his face when he saw their daughter was something Isabella would treasure forever. Wonder, love, fierce protectiveness all written in his dark eyes as he cradled the tiny life they'd created. "What will we name her?" he asked softly. Isabella had thought about this through the long months. "Sarah," she said. After Jonathan's mother, who taught him to see beyond skin to spirit, and for her Apache name.
Asa, Nayeli suggested. It means woman of strength. She'll need it.
Sarah Asa, a name bridging worlds, just as her existence did.
As Isabella recovered and learned the ways of motherhood, Apache motherhood, with its emphasis on hardy children who could survive anything, news came from the outside world. The army was establishing a new fort nearby. More settlers were flooding in, drawn by silver strikes in the mountains. The life they'd known was ending, as surely as seasons change.
We could go to Mexico, Dakota said one evening, watching Sarah sleep in her cradleboard. Join the bands that have fled south.
Is that what you want?
He was quiet for a long moment. I want our daughter to know both her heritages. I want her to speak both languages, understand both ways. If we flee too far, she becomes fully Apache but forever exiled.
Isabella finished.
But if we stay,
we risk everything. It was Niall Nish who provided an unexpected solution. The new chief, pragmatic despite his warrior's heart, had been negotiating with a group of sympathetic ranchers, men who'd benefited from the return of stolen lands and wanted peaceful relations with their Apache neighbors. They offer a trade. He explained to the gathered council, some of our people work their ranches, help with cattle, in exchange for protected land where we can camp, hunt, live traditionally when not working. It wasn't ideal. It wasn't the free life their grandparents had known, but it was survival, a way to keep the band together while the world changed around them. I need translators. Nalnish continued, his eyes finding Isabella and Dakota. People who can ensure fair treatment, prevent misunderstandings, people both sides trust. And so, as Sarah grew from baby to curious toddler, Isabella and Dakota found themselves building the bridge Jonathan had dreamed of. They spent part of each year on the Hartley Ranch, where Isabella taught the ranchers' children alongside Apache youth, where Dakota trained horses with methods that amazed the cowboys, where slowly, carefully, two worlds learned to coexist. The rest of the year they lived traditionally, teaching Sarah the old ways even as they prepared her for the new. She learned to gather mesquite and read books, to track deer and write letters, to be fully herself in either world. Not everyone approved. Some Apache saw them as sellouts, trading freedom for security. Some whites saw them as dangerous influences, teaching savage ways to innocent children. But year by year, the bridge held and strengthened. 5 years after Sarah's birth, on a spring morning with the desert blooming around them, Isabella stood with her family on a hill overlooking both worlds, the ranch spreading to the east, the Apache camp nestled in the western canyons. Sarah chattered happily in a mix of English, Apache, and Spanish, her small hands busy weaving a basket Nayeli had taught her to make. No regrets? Dakota asked, echoing his question from years before. Isabella looked at her daughter, at the man who'd saved and remade her, at the life they'd built from blood and choice and stubborn hope. None, she said firmly. Not one. The sun climbed higher, blessing the land that had tested them, broken them, and finally accepted them. Somewhere an eagle cried, and Sarah looked up, shading her eyes to watch it soar. Fly, she said in Apache. Free? She added in English. Yes, Isabella agreed, pulling her close. Both. They were not the life either had planned, not the easy happiness of fairy tales. They were something harder and more real, a family forged in the crucible of changing worlds, strong enough to span both, wise enough to know that freedom isn't the absence of boundaries, but the courage to cross them. As they walked back down the hill, Sarah riding on Dakota's shoulders while Isabella carried the basket her daughter had made, the desert wind sang its ancient song of endurance, of transformation, of love that blooms in the harshest ground. Behind them lay the graves of who they'd been, the grieving widow, the warrior between worlds. Ahead lay unknown trails and certain challenges, a world that would test their daughter as it had tested them. but they would meet it together, as they'd met everything else, with courage, with truth, with hands scarred by work and hearts strengthened by trial. The Apache had a saying, "The trail's end is the beginning of wisdom." As Isabella Rowe's teacher, translator, mother, survivor looked at her family, she knew their trail had not ended. It had simply become a road wide enough for others to follow, a path between worlds that their daughter and others like her could walk in safety. And that was happiness enough for any life, measured not in ease, but in meaning, not in safety, but in freedom, not in belonging to one world, but in building a new one between them. The desert bloomed, and they bloomed with it. Proof that love could grow anywhere, even in the space between what was and what could be. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey through the Old West. I hope Isabella and Dakota's story touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it. If you're listening to this story, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please drop a comment below and let's connect. Share your thoughts about their journey. What moments moved you most? And what you think about their courage to build a bridge between two worlds. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more authentic frontier stories that explore the real human dramas of the American West. Don't forget to hit that like button. And if this story truly resonated with you, please hit the hype button to help more people discover these powerful narratives from our shared past. Until next time, may you find your own courage to cross the boundaries that divide us.